Hey everyone, thanks for joining AJS Stars post-match panel. We have our lovely panelists here and are excited to get started. Before we do, I just wanted to quickly introduce STARS. So STARS is a committee through the American Journal of Surgery, and one of our biggest focuses is really on making academic surgery more transparent. And I think applying to residency is, obviously a big part of that. So our, folks here tonight are all part of AJS Stars and are just amazing individuals, amazing future surgeons. And I'm excited for you guys to get to know them. I'm going to start off by asking them to each introduce themselves with where they're going, where they went to school, and something they found surprising about the journey, being on this side of it. I have the questions that you all submitted ahead of time, but if you have additional questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we can bring those in. But if you guys want to start off with introductions, Meghna, are you okay going first? Or actually, we can just go in order of this picture. So Charna, Meghna, Kevin, Cameron.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Charna Kennard, and I am currently a prelim general surgery resident at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I've recently matched there as a categorical intern. It's a pleasure to be here with you all tonight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Meghna. I am a UAB medical student, and I matched at WashU in St. Louis. I'm originally from Alabama, so I'm really excited to share some insights with you. Hopefully it'll be a good time.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Kevin Seeley. I go to medical school at Rocky Vista University in Southern Utah. So tonight I hope to offer a unique perspective for any DOs in attendance, as well as my MD colleagues. I matched at Mercy One Medical Center in Des Moines, Iowa, categorical general surgery.
And hi, everyone. I'm Cameron. I go to Harvard Medical School and I master at Mass General here in Boston. Super excited to get to talk to you all tonight.
Awesome. Thank you guys for introducing yourself. Lamario, I know you're one of our M3s on the STARS committee, and I wasn't sure if you'd be willing to start us off with the first question.
Sure, yeah. My question is something I've been thinking about a ton, and it's probably one of my biggest concerns with like picking, the best fit for matching. The question is about kind of something we've talked about before in different stars, things that we've had going on. It's about the like kind of surgical training and opportunities, and how, do the panelists felt about getting a good gauge of where would be a good place for you to get opportunities to learn. One of my concerns is like, maybe if you're at an institution that has a lot of fellows, does that mean you get less operative time because, the fellows are going to have a priority for, kind of getting hands-on in cases? And then also, I guess like the operative load. Even if there is a lot of fellows, does the like operative caseload kind of balance things out to where they still like you're really needed at your institution to help, not just with like floor work, but also with like learning, intraoperative surgical skills as well. And so, kind of a two-part question that how do you like figure out the operative load other than like, I guess what the programs may tell you themselves, and maybe that's the best way to know. But just generally speaking, the question in general is about like the surgical training itself, making sure you get enough opportunities like in the OR, that way.
So whoever feels like answering, go for it. I feel like at least two people. I feel like people have different, strategies, but whoever wants to go first, go for it.
I found it really helpful to just talk to mentors at my home institution, because it was very surprising to me. Like they know several programs, even if they didn't train there. They had a friend who trains there, or someone that they've, been in residency or fellowship with who knows someone who's trained there. So that was a really helpful network for me to get a good gauge on what the operative experience was at programs that I was interviewing with. Another thing is that I don't think I actually asked this question personally, but I did hear several people along the interview trail ask, like, do cases go uncovered? And that can give you a sense of, okay, is the program stretched really thin? Are there a lot of fellows and residents maybe aren't getting that operative experience early on? So I think there are clever ways to ask those questions without just asking it up front, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would also add to that. Um, that's kind of why it was important for me to do away rotations, especially for the programs that were in my top 5 initially. So not this past cycle, but the cycle before, I tried to do away rotations with many of those programs so that I could get that experience on, okay, what is a day in the life as an intern? What are the expectations? How much OR time do you receive? Now as a prelim, it's kind of like how the sausage is made. And so you kind of know which questions to ask on the interview trail to kind of delineate, because it's very easy to say, oh, I had about 250 cases that I put into the ACGME website, or to file your cases, because you have to keep track of your own cases and record them if you want credit each year. And there are many flavors to submitting those cases, such as being a junior surgeon or first assist, or observing, that type of thing. So it's challenging as a medical student to know which questions to ask, because I've also had mentors say, oh, you'll get your numbers, don't worry about that. Like, it's not that big of a deal, because there's definitely that mindset that intern year is for learning the hospital and learning medicine, and not necessarily to be in the OR. But if you're more cognizant of that culture, you know how to be proactive when you get to that program, because that's how I was. I had a lot of OR experience from my medical school, because we had a ton of clinical experience, and I was more proactive with getting my work done quickly or answering pages from the OR, so that I still got that time to get into the OR. So it also plays into how proactive you're prepared to be, or what you want to get out of your intern year. If you want to master the list, master the floor, that's perfectly fine. If you want to start getting those reps in, start getting appies and gallbladders and things like that, well, you have to be a bit creative. You definitely have to identify staff that are more welcoming to juniors and more willing to teach, because there are simple things where you'll feel like a medical student because you don't know how to drape, and nobody is slowing down to drape with you, so that you can just get comfortable with doing that, or setting up the laparoscopic equipment and things like that. So the more confident you get at those skills as well, the more confident people are like, hey, come join me in the OR, let's do this.
Definitely. I'd be curious to, trying to hear your experience with, or just strategy with, how your questions changed kind of this time around. And I know you said, how the sausage is made now. You've seen, behind, what it's really like. And so curious about how you asked about kind of operative experience, not just as a junior, but I think as a senior. I think sometimes as applicants, we focus so much on what is next year going to be like, that sometimes we don't have the foresight as much to think about what do those senior years look like. And so I'm curious about your strategy with that.
So for me, it was a lot of like, I could definitely tell when I would ask certain residents things, they're like, oh, why are you asking this? Like, how do you know this? And it's because, being a prelim, you kind of get to know how things work. And for me, it was about things that I wanted more improvement in. So, such as protected time for ABSITE. So, the program I'm at, we pretty much have, you get the night before your ABSITE test off, but everybody has to come in the morning of to like get notes and everything done. Then they go take ABSITE. And some programs are like, look, we don't work at all. We figure it out. We have multiple dates. And so people just take it on their off days. So you have that time to decompress after ABSITE. Another thing was, if you're strictly night float, or if you also have additional 24-hour call, and how does your post call work? Another thing I would say is, okay, if you have night float, how many services are you taking care of during the night? Because so at my program, we do 3 services at once overnight that we're taking care of. So that was something that I just, wanted clarity on. And then also, as far as getting into the OR, okay, is the chief of the service making the schedule? Do they also schedule APPs for cases, or do juniors get preference first? What are, the specialty, like what am I supposed to gain out of each rotation? Because for instance, we have some community hospitals where there's endocrine, bariatrics, and MIS. So like, depending on your year, you're supposed to get a different specialty out of it. So just getting that type of clarification. I asked a lot of clarifying questions after, being on this side, just so that you walk into your program eyes open.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to share one of the questions that was submitted the most often when folks registered, and multiple people wanted to know, like, what's up with signaling? What are you supposed to do with this? It's definitely something new. It's something that I think folks are figuring out. Like, I get to be the old person and be like, back in my day, we didn't have signaling. So, I would honestly love to hear from all 4 of you, just because I feel like it's such a new component that I'm sure you guys all got different advice. And so, I'm not sure if Cameron, if you want to start off this one, and then we can kind of just go through everybody, but would love to hear about that.
Sure. I guess like the things I would say, the first thing is I would clarify with your home institution and any institutions that you do away rotations at. Do they want you to use one of your signals on them, or is it already clear to them that you're interested in that program because you did that rotation? So for me, it was nice because I didn't have to use my signals on my home programs, because they said, we know you're before me in terms of what they heard through the grapevine or what they felt in like comparing their interview yield to their friends' interview yields about which programs seemed to care about getting that signal, or which ones brought it up in the interview, or which ones, like sometimes PDs will say like, we really this year interviewed people who signaled us. So I think that that helped me to tailor, like if I was between 4 programs that I was really interested in, I only had 1 signal left, like which program was I going to use that on? The third thing I would say is I think I had a lot of success with my signals because my program signals perfectly overlapped with my geographic signals. So if I signaled a program on the West Coast, I'd also signaled like the Pacific region. And so it was like very clear that I not only had an interest in like their specific program, but I would be willing to move to that region should I have that opportunity. And then when you do a geographic signal, you can also describe kind of some of the things you love about that area. And so I said, like, my best friend and her husband live out here, and I really would love to like be on the West Coast and that was something that I was interested in. And so I think that helped also give programs a sense that like this is someone who's like committed to moving out maybe from their region. And then I think the last thing I will say is I heard a lot of mixed things about like, do you signal your favorite programs, even if they're all reaches? Do you signal programs that you think like you are really in like a good place? And kind of the way that I ended up doing it is I signaled like 2 programs that I thought were reaches and 3 programs that I thought like I perfectly kind of aligned with stats wise for average like step two, an average number of research publications. And I think that there are like more signals this year, but I do think that I felt like from my own experience and my friends' experience, there wasn't a ton of programs that if you were kind of well below their average statistics and well below their like average research output, were taking an applicant simply because they had signaled. So I think there's a benefit to kind of aligning your signals with the programs that are kind of you're not reaches for you, but kind of target programs.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I think Cameron hit on a lot of really important points. Like she said, just because you signal a program that you might be well below their averages, it doesn't mean they're going to automatically give you an interview. Additionally, along the same lines as Cameron was mentioning, just the more concrete evidence that you can give a program that you are very interested and would want to go there, the better. And so providing a signal is an example of concrete evidence that you can provide, even more so with geographical preference signaling. As for my own experience, I I can, I guess, be candid. I got 2 out of my 5 signals for interviews, which surprised me. I thought it would be more effective at getting me the interviews I really wanted. And so take that for whatever it is. I don't know if I don't think it hurt at all. But I certainly did not see a major benefit in my example. Also, anecdotally, from many of my peers, it seemed to not make that major of a difference. However, I still think it's early in its implementation, and programs are still figuring out how they're going to use it moving forward. And so we were kind of the guinea pigs this year, and I guess we'll see how it works out moving forward.
Magna, do you want to share your experience?
Yes, so I don't have too much to add, but I will say I did have a couple signals that did not align with a geographic preference. I do think the signaling means much more than a geographic preference, just based off of my own experience, because again, you're signaling one specific program rather than that larger region. And if you all have seen that, there's a map that the AAMC puts out of the division of how they do the regions. It doesn't always make sense to like to me. They're like a couple regions were the Midwest, but then they divided them kind of weird. And then Pacific is several states that are just along the West Coast, and then the Southeast is divided somewhat arbitrarily, it seems like. So regions are much more vague to me. So I also got mixed advice on whether or not to align those and not, and I decided to take a chance. And it worked out well for me that they didn't all align, but that's just to say I don't think there's that much evidence on what signaling means. So I would definitely talk to your advisors at your school to see what they think as well. But it was really helpful also to use Texas Star and some of the other resources that are online to really see, okay, what might be a target program for me. Because it's really hard just to base it off of step two, because that's really the only one objective metric that we have. So Texas Star was pretty helpful for that.
Yeah, I would say my experience with signaling, what really helped for me, I didn't do it for this past cycle, but my initial application cycle, I really attended a lot of the open houses, because that way your program director will, during those sessions, typically they try their best to be transparent about how they plan to approach the signaling process. So my medical school was it's in Texas, and so when we spoke to different program directors in Texas, they're like, "Oh well, you all are here. You're in the state, so you don't have to do the signaling. We're gonna take a look at your applications regardless." So I think, signaling can be a chance to, initiate a conversation with the program director or with that program, to just ask them, how are you planning to weighed the signaling. I've heard a variety of methods that different program directors use. Sometimes if you come from a competitive state, like say California, and you want to come to you're applying to the Midwest, well, if you signal the Midwest, they're more likely to say, oh, okay, you're really interested because you're coming from California, but you use one of your signals for our program here in the Midwest. So it just honestly depends on how those program directors choose to utilize the signal, and it's anyone's guess. I will say I struck more gold with the geographic preferences. I was very strongly about coming back to the Midwest, being in that Midwest area, and I definitely got a lot of love from the Midwest. Yeah, I got more love from the Midwest than Texas. So like it really, that geographic preference is what helped me out the most, I think, as far as just going through the process. And then as a prelim, like it's so many additional variables at play. Because my graduation year is not 2024, I'm automatically getting screened out of certain things. And so it's pretty much just a shot in the dark. I just picked places that I was interested in that aligned with my interests, and just went from there.
Awesome. Thank you all. I'm not sure if you guys saw the chat, but Lamario was asking about, not having a geographic preference. And I'm not sure if this is something you're required to put or if it's something that you could, potentially leave blank, and kind of thoughts on, if that matters or not.
So there was this, oh, sorry, Cameron. There was a statistic that I saw last year, based off of the 1 year of signaling data. And it was essentially, it's to your advantage to put 3 regions over not putting saying you have no geographic preference. I think it was 7% was your chance of getting an interview without getting an interview in a region that you didn't preference. And it was like 1 percentage point different if you said no geographic preference at all. And so the chance to get an interview if you did preference that region was much higher than that. That makes sense.
Quick follow-up. I'm in a unique situation. I'll be like dual applying. If you dual apply, is your geographic signaling separate? Because I'll be applying CT integrated programs. I do think because there's only like 30, like no preference would be best for that. But then for gen search, I think like I could figure out a top 3. But yeah, do any of you all know as far as that goes? Maybe not. Yeah, I don't think, none of y'all applied.
Yeah, I didn't, but I do think it's one main application, and then you send that same primary application to every program that you apply to. I'm not 100% sure though, because I didn't dual apply. But I'm pretty sure that information that you fill out initially on the website is your application, and then what changes is what you assign. So like the letters you can assign to each specific program. So those would be different for your general surgery versus CT programs. And so
sorry to interrupt. The only thing I would say is different different specialties have different numbers of geographic preferences. So just intuiting, I think it's probably possible. Like if you were dual applying like peds and surgery, you could have different options. So it might be the case. I would double check with someone about not geographic preferencing for CT surgery, even though there's like a small amount, just because what I've heard is that a program is going to think less about, oh, this person didn't signal me specifically, than like the program who gets that geographic signal weighing that as like, oh, and they really want to be in this area as well. And it's almost like a non-event if they don't get that signal versus like not giving yourself the opportunity to do like tell that other program, really, I want you, kind of like what Charna was saying earlier. But again, I only know one person who applied in CT and they did give geographic signals, but I'm not sure if that's like universal. So I definitely double check.
I would offer like a different point of view. Because if you geographical signal, the region that you signal can see that. And then all other regions can see that you signaled, but not them. But if you don't signal at all, then they just see nothing. All of them see nothing. And so for CT surgery, I think, maybe could serve you well to not signal to show that you'd be willing to go anywhere. But I'm just playing devil's advocate there. I think it's probably strategy and discuss with your mentors. But it is interesting to know that only the geographical region that you signal can see that. So it's not like other regions see, oh, this person signaled the Midwest, not us down in Texas or something, for example. They just see that you did put a region preference, but that it wasn't them. So I think that is something to bear in mind.
Man, a lot of nuanced strategy going on. I'm going to go to Grace's question from the chat next. And she was saying, kind of related to this topic, she heard that GenSurge is going to allow 15 program signals for the 2024-2025 cycle. I think this is something you alluded to earlier, Cameron. But any thoughts on how this could impact the application process? I know we've definitely seen things for, other surgical specialties that have more signals, but whoever wants to go for it.
I think this is a good thing. Something that was frustrating to me, especially when I was applying the fall of 2022, was that, a lot of the other specialties were looking at that data from the previous year, and they were being very intentional about being innovative for the sake of the applicants, while I felt that general surgery was kind of just frozen and kind of just they didn't want to do anything to rock the boat because it had taken so long to get to this level of comfortability for like mentors as well as program directors, and so they didn't want to rock that boat. I think it's exciting that they have finally increased that number to 15, because when I see a specialty increase their number of signals, that means those signals mean more. Because previously, when it was just 5 or 7 of for general surgery, they weren't responding to the data, they weren't responding to the trends from AAMC, and so it was just more so, okay, we don't know how this fits out. But now that they're increasing, it's getting more like, okay, they're seeing the data, they're seeing the success that OBGYN is having and orthopedic surgery is having, and so we're getting more interested and engaged with, getting rid of some of the mystery. Because like I've had so many mentors say that it's incredibly hard to mentor their medical student on how to be successful and match successfully when you have all of these moving variables and no one can give you a straight answer on the variable. So I think it's a good thing that they're increasing those numbers of signals, and I'm excited to see future trends. I know that there has even been, like on the Behind the Knife podcast, they had OBGYN, some of the leadership from the OBGYN national organization on there to discuss them leaving the ERAS application and coming up with their own. And so it was very interesting to see general surgery kind of like a major hub of knowledge kind of engaging with them, because if general surgery leaves ERAS, that's exciting. So this is all very exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes with the increase. I think it can only do good for the applicants.
Definitely. I mean, I think 15 is kind of where you want for like your rank list to end up being. I know in some other specialties, they've seen kind of decreasing number of applications per applicant, which I think is really like the goal, because then that makes the workload for program directors more reasonable and the cost for applicants more reasonable. And it just makes the applications mean more. So I'm curious to, for you all, if you guys had to go back and you guys had 15 signals instead of, the number you had, would that change the number of programs you'd apply to? Nobody asked about number of programs to apply to, but I think that's always a strategy point as well. And so as much as you guys are willing to be transparent about your all strategy in that, way, would love to hear your advice.
I can start off. So I applied to 85 programs. I know many people who applied to far more than that, and a few who applied right around where I was. I think that's pretty common, at least for DO applicants and IMG applicants, to apply broadly and to many, many programs. It is expensive. Some of my MD colleagues I know of applied more around 60. I guess the other panelists can chime in there. Were I to have 15 signals, I think my number would still be right around the same. I don't think it would change much because even though I applied to a lot of programs, I was still selective and thoughtful about where I wanted to go. I just think that it would have been kind of more exciting to show those extra programs that I was very interested in them instead of just the top five. It was pretty hard to choose which five to send those to. I agree with Sharna. I think it will be a good thing. It's just so clear for ortho, for example, 30 programs. If you don't signal them, they know, well, they had 30 chances. So I'm not even in their top 30. So I'm not going to interview them. And I'm pretty sure that that is how it played out as well. I could be wrong. I would like to see the data on what percentage of interviews were not signaled in orthopedic surgery. But I just think, yeah, the closer we can get to an ideal circumstance with signaling, the better. And I'm jealous of you all that you have 15 now.
Anybody else comfortable answering?
I mean, I can answer. So like the first time I applied, I came from a new medical school, TCU, down in Fort Worth, Texas. So pretty much I applied to like 92 programs, and those 5 signals, it was very hard because it becomes about like game theory and okay, do I use my signals on people that not reach programs or programs that I'm competitive for? Do I use them just on reach programs? And you know I don't want to saturate them at programs where everybody sends them a signal and so it won't matter, that type of thing. So I would say if I had 15 signals now, it would make me a lot more it would make me a lot more intentional because it was really interesting how that interview season, the interviews kind of highlighted what was important to me. I know that sounds crazy, but the people that interviewed me, it made a lot of sense because it was a lot about like medical education and narrative medicine, like things I have talked about and loved, but like to see, okay, these are the places for you to go and these are the plans that these places have for you. So I would say that having that 15, it would just allow me kind of to focus more on what would be most important to me. And I didn't necessarily do that with that 5. I was more so trying to translate those signals to interviews when maybe it should have just been more about what was important to me, where was my fit best, that type of thing.
I can go too. So I applied to close to 70 programs. But I honestly, like, given that this is the first year of the increased number of signals, I don't know that I would change my number that much. It's to me, it felt like it was the one thing in the process that I can control. And so having that number early on, and I like totally understand the point of view too, that like people are applying to a lot of programs. If everyone applies to a lot of programs, like this process just spirals. But it did feel like it was one factor in this very intense, long process that you do have control over. So I wanted to be in a safe as position as possible. I do feel like though in a couple years when there is more data, like that number will probably change. That average will go down. And I think the spike with virtual interviews, this has just been a growing problem. So I am really excited to see where this number takes us in the future.
And kind of mentioning virtual interviews, Lamar, I think you had a question about in-person, virtual, navigating all that drama.
Yeah, I've just heard that there's becoming more, like even for surgery, there's becoming more in-person interviews. Now I did talk to the guy from our school that matched to a thoracic surgery program. Um, he made it sound like for thoracic surgery, it's approaching like half of the institutions do in person. But I don't know if it's the same for general surgery. And then if there aren't in-person interviews, are there second looks, and how did you all navigate the whole second look landscape and how that could kind of be seen as an interview in itself? Um, just wondering I know it's like very dynamic and like obviously things are changing a lot year to year, but I'd love to hear what y'all think about that.
I guess I could maybe start out, at least for general surgery this year, only two of the interview invites I got were for in-person interviews. And I think like four of the programs I applied to overall like did in-person interviews. Um, I have heard rumblings that a few more programs are going in person on the general surgery side, but I would be surprised if it was like a significant portion next year. The one thing I will say is that even with the now having like a standardized interview release date, the like biggest favor you can do yourself post applying, pre getting interviews is look up the scheduled interview dates for each program that you apply to. A lot of them will post them on the website. And if they tell you if it's virtual or in person, and give yourself a loose map of like what dates would fit for the programs you want to interview at, hoping you get those interviews and what your top programs are. Because when the invites started coming in, the days I wanted went away very quickly. And especially I think if we're going to see a hybrid of like some programs are in person and some programs are virtual, like it's going to be a lot harder to get the dates that you want to optimize for interviewing at the most programs that you're interested in. That's just like one thing to file away. And then I forgot what the second half of the question was. It was about
Second looks.
second looks. Oh yes. Um, the programs that had second looks that I interviewed at were very clear that the second look was after they had submitted their rank list. I don't think that's the case for everyone, but I do think there's a little bit of a push to really make these second looks purely informative and not to be like factored into the decision process. And the way that I approach second looks is I prioritize going to second looks for places that I'd never spent any time in. So if I'd never seen the city before, I really try to like at least go and see, is this somewhere that I'd be comfortable living? Can I chat with the residents more about that? I honestly did not feel like I gained a ton more about the program itself that I hadn't gotten from like chatting on the phone with a resident or the virtual session beforehand, but that might be an unpopular opinion.
Yeah, I also had two of my programs do in-person interviews. Um, I thought I'm glad I got to experience in-person interviews. It was an honor because they made it clear that because they were doing in-person interviews, they invited less applicants. So they filtered them more thoroughly and invited very specific targeted applicants to attend that interview because it costs them money and time. It costs us money and time. So I also know many programs did that this year. They were far more selective and also did in-person interviews. So I hope you get to experience some. They're really fun. It does get expensive traveling around, so bear that in mind. And then for second looks, I went to 2 second looks in person. One of them caused me to bump them up on my rank list, and one of them caused me to bump them down on my rank list. So you do get, get insight about the program, you get insight about facilities, um, just the environment that you will be in. And I thought it was very helpful. Whether or not it impacted how they ranked me, I do not know. But if you do go to them, be on your best behavior, dress nice, be on time, be engaged, and all of that good stuff. Hopefully that contributes to the answer to your question.
Did you go to any second looks, Megna? Did it impact your rank list at all if you did?
I think it did for me because for whatever, and I think everyone is different when it comes to Zoom socials, but for me, that was just not my preferred style of meeting people. And so to actually be in a place, and the second looks that I went to, they did have a social event in the evening. And so to actually see how the residents interact with each other and talk to people one-on-one was really helpful for me in making my final rank list. I will say also with kind of similar to Kevin, one went up and one went down. So that just gave me a sense of certainty when making that final decision about where things were going to fall on my rank list. But I will say, obviously, don't spend time and money to go visit a place if it's not higher up on your, or like at a certain point in your list. Like I wouldn't go to every single second look that you get invited to from programs because that's going to be a lot of time and it's hard planning wise too.
Awesome advice. I know earlier we talked a little bit about interview questions in terms of operative experience, but one of the questions that people submitted in advance was asking about how to assess culture. I think we all know that's going to impact so much your resident experience and how enjoyable residency is. It's lots of bonding occurs. And so what were some of the questions you all asked to try to get a sense of culture? Yeah.
I could start with that. So for me, like let's see. A question that I really asked because like a lot of my interviews they were going to be the chief while I would be the intern. And so I would ask them, how do they envision their relationship with their intern? Because especially having gone through intern year this year as a preliminary, I feel that the intern chief connection, that's a special bond because a lot of your rotations, you will, as an intern, you'll be working with your chief, and for better or for worse, it really can show that leadership development because in the OR it's your chief who often will also be walking you through your API and who has to establish that relationship of trust where they feel comfortable letting you peel that appendix off of the cecum and different things like that. Or if they are not that comfortable with that method of teaching, then they do that part while you drive. And so it's just, I was very intentional to ask the rising chiefs, how do you see your chief year? Like what changes are you going to make to improve the program? How are you going to be intentional with your interns? And what are your expectations? Because it's very easy to, when you see interns coming in July 1st, oh, I knew all this stuff when I was an intern. It's like that was 7 years ago. Hush. That's not true. That is not a thing. Every intern, like med students are getting earlier and earlier experience, clinical experience. The health communication is getting way more intentional. Like there is a lot to learn from fresh interns fresh out of med school. And so I think being aware of that and acknowledging that, acknowledging like just like you have a new intern, you're a new chief. And so give grace and you'll receive it as well. So those are some of the things that I tried to parse out when I was attempting to parse out culture. You know, some programs, their chiefs invite their interns over to dinner at least once throughout the year. That type of thing I think is amazing, and it's a cool culture, and that's something I hope to do as a chief. You know, and so it's about understanding, you know, if residency is just a job and you are here 12 hours and that's it and you go home, that's perfectly fine. But also, you know, ask those questions to see, well, maybe you have a super lovey-dovey like program that wants to see you all the time, that wants to hang out all the time. And so that also goes into when people talk about fit, because some folks, residency is a long haul, and the people you spend the most time with, it would kind of be awesome if you get along with them because you're around them all the time. So that's just my feedback on that. That's how I try to ask about culture.
Awesome. Thank you, Charna. Any other folks want to share their questions they asked about that?
I can add one small thing. This is where I try to be really observant on the Zoom socials and pick up on things like, do the residents know the names of, are they together in the same room? Are they separate? Are they all like on different Zoom screens? If, you know, someone has one of their children in the background, does the other resident know the name of their kid or their dog or whatever? So things like that you can pick up on over Zoom socials, like how well they actually know each other. Do they hang out outside of the hospital if that's important to you? So things like that are definitely still you can parse out. But I just wanted to add that because I stopped taking notes on a lot of the things that happened during the interview and took notes on that part of things, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to making that rank list, a lot of those things will blend together.
I really like to ask people what their favorite OR memory was and what their favorite non-OR memory was. And I feel like in the operative room memory, like you got a sense of like how cordial they were with their clinical faculty, like how much were they getting to do, and like the interns were like, my chief prepped me for this, and then I got to like hand sew the bowel anastomosis. And even if it's not like a huge case that they did, just like the feelings around that and describing that, I felt like gave me a great sense of like what the culture is and like the teaching culture is. And then for non-OR memories, like the ones that are just like stupid things that they did with their co-interns or like a funny workroom memory, and it felt like everyone is really kind of together and enjoyed that time. I felt like was a positive thing. I didn't really hold it against people if it wasn't that kind of thing, but it was like a positive checkbox for some programs for me.
Kevin, do you have a question you want to share before we pivot?
No, I think they did a pretty great job. Whatever's important to you among the residents that you will be joining, I feel like is okay to ask. Um, to me, yeah, to me, it wasn't so much something specific I was looking for. Obviously, camaraderie and cohesiveness is important, but also you can just pick up on if there's disconnect, or if they don't really want to be there, or if they all seem burnt out, or if they make jokes, but you can tell that they're half truths, you know. So you can pick up on things for sure. But that's really all I have to add.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, like I feel like a ways got mentioned in passing, but that was something that people asked about as well. And I feel like for some specialties, it's very clear cut. You have to do a ways. And I feel like general surgery, it's more of this unclear strategy. I think like Charna and Kevin, I feel like you guys have very different opinions. So I would love for you both two to definitely chime in. Cameron, Magna would also love you guys to chime in as well, but whoever wants to take it away, go for it.
I can give the opening arguments. I'm just kidding. It's not going to be an argument. I just always, when when talking to incoming fourth years, I just always want to make it clear that you can go out and do a great job and have a fantastic experience, and it can be a really positive thing for you. You can also go out and day one something happens or something goes wrong, or you make a big mistake, or you don't click with your attending or your chief resident, and you are in for a miserable month. So I just want to make it clear that it's not just like I'm going to go out and do these sub-Is and it's going to be all good and dandy and I'm going to get interviews. It doesn't always happen like that. So just be realistic with yourself, be reflective, think about what your strengths are and whether they will lend themselves to you spending a month with people and having that end up as a positive thing. I did 3, and overall, I think it was a positive thing. I got interviews at 2 out of the 3. One of them was definitely a reach program for me. So it was a learning experience. And if anyone has any more specific questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me.
I guess I have a specific question before we pivot. For the programs that you did aways, did you get a letter from that rotation? And if so, did you only submit it to that program or did you submit it to other programs as well?
No, no, I didn't only submit it to that program. Yes, I did get letters. I got letters from 2 different aways, and I think they were probably some of my strongest letters. And I used those as my main letters for my application.
Hey, Charna, go for it. Take it away.
Okay. So I am definitely pro aways. Coming from a new medical school, we just established like our own general surgery residency, our GME office, that type of thing. It was important for us to go out and spread the name of our school and get that reputation established. And I'm sure that is part of the reason why I'm so pro aways, because my school, they even set up our curriculum so that we were technically fourth years by I want to say March. And so that way we were eligible for a lot of visiting rotations and things like that in the spring before everybody else. So that also had an impact on like, oh, wow, yeah, away rotations, amazing. I definitely agree with Kevin. You have to be ready. I mean, for me to prepare, I literally did my sub-I first at my home rotation first with my chair of surgery, and he just grilled it because I was going to his home program where he went to residency, and he was like, you gotta know this stuff, you gotta know this stuff. So like, if you have that support system within your school where your department of surgery is going to rally behind you and prepare you, then I think that also sets you up for success when you get to those away rotations, because it is a month-long interview. It is a month-long interview. Everything you're going to want to second guess everything that you have said. I mean, that was the first time I would get like emotional, like, oh, I'm sorry, and did I do the wrong thing, and just think over each day over and over. When I'm in my Airbnb, it's a stressful, crazy time. You just have to prepare yourself for that. But it's also a wonderful time for you to network and for you to even like always keep your eyes open for more mentors, because literally a mentor that I have to this day, I met her doing my away rotation. And then when I had to soap, she wrote me in a fresh letter. I had a fresh letter to soap with that I would not have had for surgery if I had not gone on that away rotation. So there is definitely a risk. It can definitely harm you. But I also think that it's wonderful to just experience different things, to experience different health systems. Because like for me, it's amazing to experience how one institution views their pathology and how easily and readily accessible it is, while other places it's like, oh, the path will come back in a week, and they don't care about it as much. Or even just, you know, the different EHR systems. And so like if you, especially if you don't particularly care for your home programs, how they do things for surgery, it's definitely worth doing an away rotation because people do things differently. And you will be surprised where you would think, oh my gosh, I thought I hated surgery. No, you just hated surgery where you are. Like there are other ways to do it and there's other ways to explore. And I know that by the time that you apply for a ways that, you know, you should be narrowing down your specialty, but just also if you like surgery, ways is that time to explore other regions. Each region does something completely different. Coming from the South, coming from Texas, and coming up to the Midwest and how they do things, completely different. And a lot to learn, a lot to provide as feedback as well. So that's how I view the ways. And I think it's something that you should at least do one.
Awesome. Cameron, Megna, did either of you do aways or want to share any insight?
Go ahead, Cameron.
The only thing I was going to say is that different programs have different philosophies on if you do in a way whether or not they'll offer you an interview. And that's not saying like being guaranteed an interview is like the be all and end all, but if you are using a ways as a way to like boost your like the options for interviews, it's kind of like something to be cognizant of. And like other applicants can tell you, not that I recommend going on our medical school, but the spreadsheet for general surgery applicants does like pretty keep track of the programs that like kind of universally offer interviews versus the ones that don't, and just something to be a little bit cognizant of as you're going through.
Awesome. Megna?
Yeah, I really don't have that much to add. I did not do any aways, and that was based off of advice that I got from my mentors at my home institution.
I know we're coming up on time, but I wanted to do two things. I know earlier you guys mentioned resources, but I feel like me as an applicant, when I hear resources, if I'm not actually familiar with it, I have a hard time finding it. So if you guys wouldn't mind typing in the chat the resources you used for kind of evaluating programs for fit and other things like that, that would be wonderful. But then if you each wouldn't mind taking a moment to share any other piece of advice you didn't get to share for the folks about to go through this process. We have just a few minutes left. So thank you guys for your time.
I can start. I think one helpful thing that I did throughout the interview season was keep a running list, like a running rank list, as I went throughout, because for me, like when it came to January, like things really started blurring together. But because I had gone through my interview season and had put certain programs above one another, it made sense when it came to the end of February and you actually had to submit your longer list. And so that was one thing that someone had told me to do who had gone through the cycle the year before, and I found that really helpful.
I can chime in. I would just say that the things that we as medical students think are impressive and think are good do not always align with what program directors are actually looking for. And so try to put yourself in their shoes, think critically about your application, seek advice, seek mentorship from people who know better than you. I think that was extremely important for me and opened my eyes to a lot of things that I was thinking that maybe were not as important as several other factors. So you'll be surprised at how things actually work at that level once the curtain is kind of pulled back for you. So definitely seek mentorship throughout this process. Do not go it alone. Don't just rely on Reddit or the internet or Student Doctor Network or whatever. Definitely seek advice. That's my biggest piece of advice. Thank you all for being here.
What were some of the things, Kevin, before we switch, that you were surprised to hear emphasized by your mentors?
Let's see. Well, for example, I went in thinking that um let's see, how you frame your activities is one thing. And it's hard to be specific with that without going into, specifics of my application. So I'm sorry. Um, your personal statement, probably, there's like a bell curve of personal statements. Bad ones will get you rejected. Um, the vast majority will be, right somewhere in the middle. They'll be excellent, they'll be great, but they won't always get you an interview. The really, really good ones are few and far between and can get you an interview. So you want to make sure you're at least at the top of the bell curve or to the right. Otherwise, I can't really be more specific without getting into too many details. So
yeah, it's okay. Sorry for pushing you.
No, it's okay.
Cameron or Charna, do you want to go next on your tip?
Sure, I can go next. I would say have in your mind what your non-negotiables are. That's what I would say. So, to be fully transparent, my biggest thing with the first time I applied, I did not want to be in a new program for general surgery. I wanted to establish program. I'm already the inaugural class for a medical school, and that was a lot of work. And I am I love being a junior, meaning that I love having seniors to ask questions to and have like people ahead of me to guide me. I love that. I've been big sis all 4 years of medical school. And so it's been nice to just have a senior and I can ask them and I can be like vulnerable and inexperienced and get that advice. So I knew that that was something I wanted. And so I made certain decisions with my rank list and ultimately I went unmatched and I did a prelim year. Do I regret that? No. I was called, my bluff was called. And so I took that call because at the end of the day, I knew that there were certain things I wanted in a program. I wanted that academic focus. I wanted to become more confident in my research as a possible, physician scientist. So those were things that I highlighted and I still highlight to this day. So I would say, as you go through this process, what are your non-negotiables? Are you willing to not match for them? If that is not the case, then by all means, list everywhere. But if you've interviewed at a place and you do not want to match there, you do not feel comfortable there, well, do not put that program on your list, because there's always the chance that you will fall all the way down to that program. And I know of many people and I've seen the emotions, I've seen the heartbreak from making those types of decisions. So I would say, what are your non-negotiables and how committed are you to those non-negotiables? That's my feedback. And thank you for a wonderful night of discussion. I love talking about stuff like this.
You want to wrap us up?
Sure. And I guess I'll also try to address the question in the chat, Leah, which was kind of related to my thing, but I think that all of our journeys are like non-linear in some aspects, and you did extracurriculars that maybe weren't that meaningful to you, and you did a research project that didn't quite fit. But when people have such limited time to review applications, they kind of enjoy things being tied up with some kind of bow. So as much as you can, as you're like writing your personal statement, as you're preparing that like answer to the tell me about yourself question, like give them something to hang their hat on. Like, this is the applicant that's interested in X. And don't create a narrative where you're like, I'm passionate about like underserved medicine and only activity on your like application is basic science research. Not that like those two things can't be compatible, but you have to like make that link for people because they want to know that they're getting what you're selling. Like the applicant that's coming to their residency program is going to do the XYZ things that you are claiming you're passionate about, and they want to see how you fit into their program. So I think what makes like a personal statement that's not going to fall into the get you rejected and is good to great is like you walk them through that story and show how your experiences that maybe don't seem like they quite fit together, put them into a story. What are they making you passionate about to bring into that residency program? And then make it something that it doesn't have to be like completely unique. I'm sure like the things that I talked about, lots of people talked about, but like make it yours in some way and like spend a lot of time on that thought process as you're going through the application.
Awesome. Well, I know we are over time. But I just wanted to share this last slide. Sorry, if any of y'all who are joining tonight, here, let me share my screen one more time. Apologies. Applied this cycle. This is a survey for the application process this year. And so I'm going to put the link in the chat as well, just to help us better understand, just the application and match process. So this is a survey being done by Dr. Calicia Clark, and she's an amazing researcher. But I also want to just thank our awesome panelists. You guys are all amazing. I've really enjoyed getting to know each of you over this year and can't wait to see what amazing interns you guys are next year. And with that, we'll end the evening. But thank you guys all for listening in, and have a good night and good luck next year yourself.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Have a good night.